I'm Nathan. Nice to meet you, Miss Paul.
Very nice to meet you. I like your jacket. Nice color.
Thank you. Ooh, yeah, that looks great. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
What are some of your favorite restaurants in Toronto?
One of my favorite restaurants is more about mood. Most of the food I like is pretty cheap and ethnic.
Well, thank you, Miss Paul, for joining me today for this conversation on food security in Canada.
Thank you for joining me in a way. This is Toronto Centre and this is Regent Park and a place that means a lot to me. My mom started teaching just down the street, I think about 3 blocks away from here. So yes, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to my hood.
And I asked you to pick the restaurant today for today's meal. Why did you choose the Paintbox Bistro?
Well, it means a lot to the community. The community has gone through a major revitalization. This is a part of it. This space, as you can see, it's one that you can eat in, or at least people came to eat in during the pandemic. And then even now, the restaurant hasn't fully opened again, but it's still a center of gravity for the community. It's a place where people come to congregate, and the food is good.
It is good.
More than anything, all of the rest of that is nice, but at the end of the day, it's a restaurant. So the food is good.
Yeah.
It's plentiful, and I love it.
I just want to know a little bit more about you and through your upbringing and your work abroad and your work in Canada. How have these life experiences shaped your relationship and understanding of food?
Yeah, my kids say I harp on about that sometimes because I've made the point in different meetings and debates and things that even though I grew up in the city, that the connection between my family and food is pretty tight. Both sides of my family, my mother's side and my father's side, they both came from farming families and from small islands where you essentially grew whatever you ate. And if you didn't grow it, then your neighbor grew it and you shared together. My mother's island had been, when she was growing up, was called the breadbasket of the Caribbean. And so understanding where food came from, understanding our connection to the natural world is something that I grew up with. Yeah. And so yes, that's something you take with you. And this community is extraordinary that way. You have lots of new Canadians who absolutely want to grow things themselves. They want to grow the things that they're eating. And so all around here, you have huge community gardens that are just full of delicious things from all over the world.
Yeah, and we're privileged to be in an area where, we can have food like this and this meal in front of us. It's a privilege that we're even able to be in a restaurant right now and have this conversation.
Yep.
And, right now, this is such a positive relationship with food that you and I are sharing, and hunger is the antithesis of that.
Yeah.
1 in 7 Canadians right now are experiencing food insecurity. When were you first aware of the systemic issues that have led to these rates in food insecurity in Canada?
Well, I've had times in my life when I've been hungry. My family was fortunate. My mom was a teacher, an educator. My grandmother was a personal support worker. But the money has to stretch very far. It's not just you and my siblings, the immediate family. It has to be sent back home. It has to be used to pay off student debt. It has to support bringing other people to Canada. And so there were definitely times when I was growing up where I was hungry. Or I didn't have enough to eat. And so when you grow up, even once with that experience, you're really aware of it. And certainly in this community, you can't escape it. There are food banks all over the community. There are lines around the corner when they're open. Almost every community has their own interior food distribution service for residents because so many people are struggling. So certainly in this community where so many people are living in poverty, it's impossible to ignore it and to escape it.
Yeah. And I guess just coming from a food insecure household, when you see these lineups stretching around blocks outside food banks, not only in Toronto or in Iqaluit where there's high rates of food insecurity, but also in big cities like Vancouver where I'm from. What do you make of that?
Well, what I make of it is that our priorities are not where they should be. There is absolutely no reason that in a country as wealthy as ours, and as you said, I mean, where food is bountiful and inexpensive to produce, that anyone should go without the food that they need. And yet we still have so many that do. And so, you know, the pandemic made all of these things worse. The lines got longer. People stepped up to help their communities and to take care of their neighbors. But food banks and that kind of support is not a substitute for making sure that people have enough money to afford the basics of life. And so this is really a chance for us to not just talk about, but really create policies that respond to the question, how much do we value life? What is a life worth? How will people live in dignity going forward? And I see that we have all the solutions we need. We just need to have the action.
And one of the solutions that you've pushed for and the Green Party has long pushed for is a guaranteed livable income.
That's right.
One of the main criticisms of a guaranteed livable income is how it's going to be paid for, how it's going to be operationalized. How do you plan to make this happen?
Well, we both know that poverty costs money. You know, we both know that it isn't cost free. When people don't have enough to eat, for instance, and you know, I can tell you that from experience, it's hard to study. It's hard to concentrate in the classroom. Or if you're an adult, it's hard to be able to be productive at work. There's a price that we pay. The insecurity also creates uncertainty. It creates anger. It creates frustration. It leads to mental health issues. That costs us money as well. People who don't eat well are sick more often and end up in our hospitals more often, and that costs money as well. And so we always have to remember that there is a cost to inaction. And then, you know, again, the parliamentary budget officer, he said that there was a way for us to pay for this, and there is. We can streamline our existing programs. Much of the cost of those programs is on the administrative side. We can eliminate duplication in programs, which of course we have because we have such a patchwork system. And so we can pay for it. I mean, it was a very optimistic report in terms of its doability and its affordability.
So at the federal level, where are we at with this? How much support is this getting?
It's getting more and more support every day. And I will say that of all the policies that we should have been heading back to Parliament to put in place, particularly as we see the emergency benefits wrapping up, this is definitely at the top of the list because the NDP supports this policy. The Greens, as you said, have advocated for many years for this. The NDP has adopted it now. It's part of their platform. The Liberal membership voted for supporting a guaranteed livable income during their April convention. And so we could have done this. We could have cooperated together and delivered this for people in Canada. But the consensus is growing and it's cross-partisan as well, which is really what you need when you're talking about creating these kind of legacy social programs.
I want to circle back to the area we're in right now, which is Toronto. This is your riding, Toronto Centre. This is the city you were born in. And no party leader knows Toronto better than you do. So you probably know the issues that are faced in Canada's biggest city.
I do.
Toronto has higher rates of food insecurity than the national average and the provincial average per capita.
Yeah.
How did this happen?
You know, sometimes something starts as a drip and then it turns into a stream and then it turns into a flood. There are many things that we understood that it seems that we have forgotten and that we need to return to. So we understood some time ago that if you invest in people, you're investing in yourselves and your future. And this is how we got our programs like Medicare and our pension plan. We understood that ensuring that people had an affordable place to live also, again, gave them one of the building blocks for future success, and we invested in co-op housing and social housing and community supportive housing. We invested in mental health care. And at a certain point in the 90s in particular, and the early 2000s, we stopped. We stopped doing that, and it takes a while for these things to catch up, but they have caught up with us. And so people no longer live in adequate housing. People are spending half of their income just to pay the rent, and so then they don't have enough money for food. People aren't being paid enough for the work that they do, and in a city as expensive as Toronto, that means that sometimes you're going to go without eating. So again, used to know what to do. We just need to get back to those things. And again, we have everything that it needs at the moment, other than the political will that we need at the various levels of government.
Rates of food insecurity are the highest in Canada, in northern Canada,
That's
in
right.
rural communities.
That's right.
Have you seen some of the prices of food in northern Canada?
Well, we have members up there, and we did some meetings with the leadership candidates when I was running, and I've had the opportunity once to visit the high north as well. And yes, of course, you hear the stories about a box of cereal costing $20 or $30, and just the tremendous markups on the price of basic goods.
Yeah.
You also hear the stories from Indigenous peoples who have traditional ways of hunting and gathering food, and are not able to afford to do that anymore, or there have been restrictions on their ability to do that.
And there's $100 million in government subsidy towards
That's
a program
right.
to lower the cost of food, but still the people living in these areas say this program is failing them.
That's right.
What changes need to be made to Nutrition North Canada?
Well, it's really more what's needed, just at a more meta level, let's say, is more involvement from those most impacted by food insecurity. So many of these programs are designed elsewhere and without enough involvement. And I don't call it consultation, because already if you're consulting, it means that you've already designed it incorrectly. You should be designing and developing these programs being led by those communities. That's the way that you avoid the unintended consequences. That's the way that you avoid throwing a bunch of money into a program that simply is not going to work in the local context. So with this and so many other of these, of the social issues that we're facing, the things related to ensuring people can live with dignity, it's about putting the people who are most impacted at the table and responding to what they are telling you they need, as opposed to you telling them what they need.
Okay. And you know, climate change is also having implications on agriculture in Canada. How do we make agriculture more sustainable here?
Well, you know, we were already a bit late and certainly unprepared, and we need to catch up as quickly as we can. It's really going to be a mix of climate mitigation and climate adaptation. The mitigation side we just spoke about. We need to limit how much worse things get by reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and then we need to help our agricultural sector to adapt. We need to make sure that the things that we are planting and how we're planting them don't work against the new landscape that farmers find themselves in. We need to encourage them to, well, first to create. We need to create and then help them to adopt technologies that support them. They can play a part in mitigation through things like carbon sequestration as well. So we really need a strategy. You know, we don't have a climate adaptation strategy for our agricultural sector, and we definitely do need one.
So there's a lot of work to be done there.
Yep.
And you know, in a press conference a couple of days ago, you said that you want to replace, the Green Party wants to replace 30% of food imports from other countries with domestic agriculture. But already farmers are facing a labor shortage in Canada. Migrant workers that harvest and process our food are having a hard time staying and immigrating to Canada. What can be done to help them?
Yeah, and this is where we have to remember that things, coming back to the beginning of our conversation, things are connected. They're interconnected. If you address one issue and you don't think about it holistically, then you end up often with unintended consequences. And so absolutely we need to bring more food production back to Canada. We saw at the early stages of the pandemic how incredibly overly dependent we are on global supply chains for our food, and that we're one of the biggest importers of food in the world, despite the abundance of arable land. And so we do need people that are willing to till the land, to be farmers, to work on that land. And so you need to think at all of those steps. We need apprenticeship programs so that young people can get into farming. We need programs that allow farmers to transfer land more easily to members of their family or to those young farmers. We need to have a system that allows migrant workers to have a true pathway to permanent residency here and citizenship if they want it. We have a labor gap. We can't just focus on the upper end of the labor market when we're seeking to attract immigrants. We need to get back to basics and remember the days when we invited people to Canada from many different backgrounds, many different skill sets, so that they could do the work that actually needed to be done in Canada.
So after our conversation today, it's pretty clear that the way the food system works in Canada is not working.
Correct.
We have restaurants that have been devastated by the pandemic, but also restaurant workers, grocery store employees, food delivery drivers, farmers that often find themselves in financially precarious situations, and they themselves are food insecure. That's pretty hard to make sense of.
Yeah. And I can't.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're looking to me to make sense of that. There is no sense to it. As we've talked about, everything that you've described has a solution. One thing that we're very lucky to have here in Canada are incredibly thoughtful people. We have a very active civil society. So every single one of those things, whether it's precarious employment, whether it's our local food production, all of these things have their problems that have solutions. And so more than anything in this moment, this election, which, I've said, I've been very, very vocal, we should not be in. It's still an opportunity for us to say, how will we do better and how will we ensure that we are not in such a vulnerable position in the future. So it is guaranteed livable income and universal pharmacare and a living wage, and access to post-secondary education. It is supporting our farmers through this moment of transition.
But what can be done now to help them?
All of those things can be there. The only thing, I'm in my late 40s, and I grew up at a time when people in Canada felt that we were able to do anything and to build anything together. We created programs, national and global programs from scratch. And we had that ambition for ourselves, and we had that confidence in our ability. So, when we talk about any of these things, if we want to do it, we can do it. And don't let anyone tell you that it's not doable, it's not practical. Green Party members, we're dreamers, but we're practical dreamers. I'm a lawyer, I'm a policy analyst, I'm pretty dry and pretty technical. If I'm excited about these ideas, it's exactly because I know that we can do them.
Thank you, Ms. Paul.
Thank you so much, and bon appétit.
Thank you.